Welcome to Untethered with Restless, the podcast that's here to help you break free from the tethers that are holding you back, unleash your inner brilliance, and claim the life you're meant to live. I'm your host, Jen, and in this episode, we are going to show you how to get out of your head and into your heart. Let's dive in. Hi, friends, it's Jen. Today on the podcast, we have Kristy Mandour, who I met recently at a retreat on a beach. Funny story. What I recommend that you do, if possible, is go over to the episode where she interviews me on her podcast called So to Speak, SOW to Speak. We talk about the punniness of this, but go listen to that episode to find out how Kristy and I ended up meeting. We go through the entire story and really delve into just some of the silly mindset stuff that can happen to us, even as grown ass adults who struggle with sitting down at the cafeteria table with the cool kids. So we have a whole conversation about that on her podcast. However, if you just want to dive into this podcast straight away and go back and listen to that one, that's great too. But Kristy founded So to Speak, which is a company on a mission to support high achieving overthinkers and leaders and entrepreneurs in getting out of their heads. So she really helps people to do this. She is a speaker and ICF certified energy and leadership coach. And what Kristy does is she shares her decades-long research on human behavior with clients and audiences, and she does it with humor and heart. So she is just a really cool human who has a really creative approach to the work that she does. And I'm so excited for you to meet her as we dive in to the persona work that she does with people. I think you're really going to find this fascinating. I know that a lot of people on this podcast who listen to this podcast, you're overthinkers, you're perfectionists, you tend to kind of worry about some things, all of these same challenges that I have and that I have had over my decades of life. I know that some of these are things that you were struggling with too. And this conversation will help you gain some new strategies in order to help you to move forward toward your dreams, which is the ultimate goal of this podcast. So without further ado, welcoming Kristy Mandour. Hi, Kristy.
I'm so grateful to be here. Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Jenless.
We were talking right before we jumped on. She said that I'm a full name person. You can't just say Jen. It's Jenless.
It's Jenless.
Which is so funny because for so much of my life, I went by my last name. Growing up, my last name was Blaney, and I think people just like to say it. So they would call me Blaney. There's something about that name that's just kind of fun to say. And so now it's Jenless. So, but we're here to talk about you.
Yeah, but I get it. There is I also love words. You know what I mean? So I get it. Like Blaney and Les, they both roll right off the tongue. So
yeah. When I got married, it was Bliss. A few people called me Bliss because the two just combined.
Oh, that's beautiful. Makes sense. It just makes sense. I love it.
Yeah. We are here to talk about you. And funny that you mentioned words because you have a podcast called So to Speak, SOW to Speak, which is such a fun play on words. Why did you get that podcast started? Why did you choose that name? Why did you choose that topic?
I love So to Speak. I love puns. I love any play on words. I also think it's a great way for learning. It's easy to grasp things. I love acronyms, like anything that can be a way to learn, So the podcast started from during COVID, like during 2020. And my company was always called So to Speak, but the podcast originated as the Closet series because I started it out of my linen closet, like many people, probably still do. I do some of my solo episodes still because it's a built-in wonderful acoustic, right?
Right.
And I wanted to shine a light on local business owners so that for a number of reasons. One, so that we could all feel connected because we were stripped of social unexpectedly, so that their businesses could thrive and it could contribute to our economy locally. And so that people could see the human side of business owners, because it can be so like, I have to show a certain face as a business owner, and that's not who anyone connects with, right? We connect the human side. So it was very fun. I have a wonderful group of people who I'm friends with who happen to all be business owners. So it was very easy to have them come on. And I always wanted someone to be like a fly on the closet wall. So I wanted it to be very natural, like as if we were sitting around a dining room table or on a living room floor or couch. And it ended up being very natural for it to be the closet series because we talked about a lot of topics that we often keep in the closet. And it allowed people to feel less alone. You know, we still are in an incredible loneliness epidemic, and mental health is huge. It started in a way when things become very popular, I hesitate with it because it becomes almost diluted. You know, empathy was like the big word for a while, and it almost dilutes the true meaning of empathy, the visceral feeling of empathy. Same with mental health. Everybody's talking about mental health. And until people can really listen in and realize that they're not alone in it versus just hearing it or having to be like a checkoff for a lot of companies to bring in mental health workshops and professionals, there is something about podcasts, and I'm preaching to the choir here, that creates a sense of intimacy that is so reassuring and supportive and relieving and like, thank God. And that just grew from there. And then the closet got a little too confining. So I shifted gears and I wanted to be able to expand and bring other people in and not just focus on things we quote unquote keep in the closet, but really focus on mindset and specifically on overthinking, because I'm a recovering overthinker. I still have a tendency to dabble in, but I am a recovering overthinker. And I feel like, so to speak, as a natural, you know, so to speak, what are you planting in your mind? Because that is what you are speaking, whether it be non-verbally or verbally. You and I have spoken a lot about energy work, and how you're showing up is what you're speaking. And the way you're showing up is intricately connected to what you're thinking. So it was just a natural shift, and it was easier. It's like, so to speak, you don't have to have all these names, like, so to speak, the closet series. It was just, so to speak.
Yeah. Like that you ended up talking yourself out of the closet.
Yes.
So to speak.
I did. So to speak. We just do that. Like we pepper that in like the whole time. Like, see how many times.
I love that. There's certain episodes where I'm like, I think we need a word count on how many times I said passion. This time it's so to speak.
Hey, listen, it's a pretty great word to say. So I'm all for it.
It's true. It's true. So, okay. So you are an overthinker, and you and I have talked about this. We just had an episode on your own podcast. And if you listen to the very beginning of this episode, I directed people over to it because you and I met on a beach in just like this weird scenario that ended up putting us both there on the beach. And there was just something about you that drew me over, you know, to just say hi. I almost left the beach. I was like, okay, I'm just going to go back to my room. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to go ask them if I can sit down with them and have a conversation. And so there was something about your energy. And we even had a quick convo before we started here where we were talking about, you know, it's like just the energetic connections that we feel with each other. How did you end up getting interested in energy work? What kind of drew you to just seeking more knowledge about this kind of thing? Because it's kind of what ended up connecting us. I had offered breath work at a retreat that we're at. And then, you know, we ended up connecting on it. You ended up giving me a bracelet. We're both wearing these same bracelets today, you know, so we've kind of connected on this topic, and I'm so curious about it myself. What got you into it?
So I will absolutely answer that. I want to back up for a minute because I want to highlight something you just said that I feel is so important for people to, again, feel less alone about. I don't care how old you are. When you're someone who is approaching a situation like you were on the beach alone, and I was with Elisa, my friend Elisa, there is a natural, can I sit with you at the lunch table feel? It doesn't go away. It's like this sense of, am I invading? All of these thoughts come in. Or am I going to be rejected? Is this okay? All of this floods in. And I just want to normalize that because oftentimes we feel like we should outgrow it. And the more that we can embrace that and say, you know what? It's okay that I'm feeling like that. And then look what happened from you taking the chance and being courageous and realizing that even though I don't want to necessarily be here, I want to be alone right now. There was something about my energy that was what I'm sensing from you was a sense of companionship. So it was just something that you want to be around, not necessarily, you didn't maybe even need to talk. We had a wonderful conversation, but that is the beauty and like the comfort and the nurturing nourishment that comes from energy across the board. We all have that in us to create that sense of companionship for others and for ourselves. So I just wanted to pause there because I do feel like that's an important thing as we get older, especially women. It's so natural to feel like you're walking into a networking event or you're walking into a cocktail party and it's like, oh, I'm by myself. And so I love that you did that.
Thanks for calling that out. I think that is
Yeah.
such an important thing that I completely glazed over, and you just were like, this is one of your gifts that you see these things and you're like, we need to talk about this because that is so important. That feeling never goes away, and just having awareness of, why do I want to sit at that lunch table? Like, oh, I kind of do want to go sit down with those people, and checking in with the energy of the situation and, what you're feeling about it. And sometimes maybe it's not a lunch table that is right for you. And so maybe there's like a feeling there too, because that has definitely
100%.
happened in my adult life with friends where I'm like, I just don't think that's my vibe. Like, I want to hang out with that, or I feel like I should hang out with that person, but the should is not the reason to be hanging out.
Well, the should is the helpful signal, right? So it's like so it's the unhelpful thought that is the helpful signal.
Okay. Break that down. What that means.
So meaning like when you had that moment of noticing that you were like, oh, I just thought that I should do that. It's an unhelpful thought. We all know the whole idea of like shitting all over yourself. I think we've all probably heard that by now. And so that whole idea of, oh, I just noticed I was guilting because shitting is guilting, right? So shitting myself, I'm shitting that I should, oh, thank you, unhelpful thought, because now it's a helpful signal that I'm going to choose to go this way instead.
That's helpful. I think that's helpful for anybody to think about because we know why. Like you said, people hear that word, or hear that phrase, stop shitting yourself. And we understand why, but that link between it and guilt is really important too. Guilt is it was long one of my big things. It was actually the thing that sent me into personal development, was realizing how guilt was really running my life completely. So I know that some listeners struggle with that too. So I appreciate you going into a little side tangent on that.
Yeah. And it's all connected because, you asked me like, what got me into this? And it was really what returned me to it, because growing up as a kid, we are all intuitive. I'm a huge part of the work I do is undercover, really, to help people really just get back in touch with their intuition. If you really want to break it down, that's really what it is, because that's where all the answers are. That's where we often are flooded internally. It's just a matter of like meaning internally in your head. And if you can redistribute that energy, so when you stop overthinking, you're just redistributing the same energy to move more towards your heart. That's what I focus on. And within that, you're getting closer to your intuition. And as a kid, I still am. As a kid, I was highly intuitive, and it freaked out my parents. Like they didn't know how to handle it. And my dad to this day will be like, you were so intuitive that I truly did not know what to do. Like it's intimidating, especially if you're a parent and you have a kid who's just sensing everything. You can't bullshit. Like you just are really kind of caught, right? Like you just are feeling the sense of, okay, I'm going to either choose to be honest or else what is happening? Like, I don't know how to, and one thing that I heard as I was getting older, I was in my 20s, that I had almost like I was in LA for a couple months and I was like cannonballed out of there back to upstate New York. I was viscerally like, LA was not my space to be in. I had incredible panic attacks when I was there. And
why?
I feel that I was so flooded with fear of, I love that you're asking that, because I don't know if I feel like I was so flooded with fear and I was so quick. So if your listeners can stay with me for a minute, I was very intuitive as a kid. It wasn't necessarily received well, and I didn't know what to do with it. So I immediately went to go fast. Like going quick was a way for me to get over it. So I would like leapfrog over connecting with people because I sensed so much. I didn't know what to do with it. So I sped up. Okay. So when I went to LA, I'd lived in New York for close to 10 years. And I was like, I'm going to go to LA. And I had done acting and writing, and I really wanted to do screenwriting, producing, stuff like that. And I got to LA, and I look at it now like it was a flurry of fear, and being in the biggest intuitive hit that I got when I was there, because I looked at it as such a failure for so many years. The biggest intuitive hit I got was it was my soul's way of bringing me literally home. I'm in my hometown right now, like literally home for me to slow down. Mm-hmm. It was like, no, you are not going to survive at this speed. We hope you listen, go back home. And I remember I was driving back from the Hoover Dam. I had gone with two of my friends, and I was driving, and it was that song that was really popular back in like the early aughts, like, I'm going home to the place where I belong. You know, remember that song? Mm-hmm. Anyway, Chris Daughtry, I think. But it came on, and I was like, I'm going home. Like, I'm going home. Everything in me was like, I'm going home. And I didn't know why. And I didn't have to know why. And I ended up coming back upstate. And it was one of the best moments in life that I can look back on and say, you know what? It's exactly where I needed to be. And it allowed me to slow down so I could really, truly tap into what it felt like to slow down and get out of my head and really light up my intuition more, so that I could then be where I am now with working with people and helping them realize that it's okay. I mean, it's a whole process to get out of your head, because we all have our own mechanisms. And believe me, I went through many of them to numb out. And the one that stayed consistently was living in my head and overthinking. And it became a habit. It became very uncomfortably comfortable, you know, like that comfortably numb feeling. I'm just going to go in my head. And it wasn't until I met a dear friend of mine who is one of the most amazing, present, nurturing energies I've ever been around in my life, who supported me without really knowing it and meaning to, and feeling safe in my body, because I realized that so much of what I was doing was escaping my body, because it was so sensory, which is why I numbed out so much, because I was like, I am so highly sensitive that I need something to shut it down. I just was going to the most disadvantageous coping mechanisms. And then experiencing it and realizing like, oh my gosh, so much of it is about feeling safe in your body. I feel like everything's about that, so that you can then, which led me to really hone in on self-compassion and to do it in a very creative way, because what you felt on the beach wouldn't have been what you felt if I hadn't done all of that work, right? Like I have moments like everybody where I like scream at my kids, or I'm in my head, or I'm like off, but I catch it sooner. The recovery time is much sooner. But until you can truly be in that place where you are accepting of all of these parts of yourself, and it's an ongoing experience, believe me, it's like as soon as you think you got it, it's like another one pops up at the table and you're like, God, like, really? Really? It's like, but that's where the creativity comes in, because I have a tendency now to get more excited about it versus like dreaded.
Yeah, I'm really excited to dig into the creativity thing. And first, I just like to react to some of what you said, because I can relate to that so much as a child. I totally numbed out, and I didn't realize until a few years ago that that's how I had lived my whole life, was up in the head and also through other people's eyes, looking for others to tell me what's okay and what's not okay. And I was never checking in with myself and with my intuition. And yet some of the biggest moments in my life were those LA moments that you had, where it was like, my intuition was so dang loud. It has just moved me, because again, we are highly intuitive. And I think a lot of the listeners of this podcast are the same way. It's like, we're so intuitive, but we've numbed it out, that we've stopped listening, and there is a need to reconnect. And we both do that work, but we do it in our own ways. And so I'm so excited to dig into the ways that you do it, and the creative ways that you do it with people, because you work with, is it mostly corporate clients, or is it all kinds of people, just to be clear for the listener who you work with?
So it started as corporate. It started as very corporate, and now it has opened to be high achieving people who like really are high achieving, really good people who are leaders, creatives, entrepreneurs. Those are like the three. I believe we're all leaders in our own right, but like the traditional C-suite VP level. And what I noticed too is that I tend to work, and I work with men and women, and I tend to work with people. The overarch is that they're so heart-centered. It's just that somewhere along the way, it was not safe to be so heart-centered. So they're very logical, or they're in their head all the time, or they're overthinking, or they're really worried. And then when we work to slow down in a way that feels safe for them and also strong, like there's a strength in them that they can tap into that keeps them feeling anchored, which we can get into more if that's too abstract, their leadership totally changes. Like you literally can see when they show up to sessions, or if I see them online, I'm like, wow, I just literally saw a different presence come from you. So it's really, I'm so grateful and so appreciative. And I learn from every single one of my clients that I work with, because it's always that, right? It's just co-creative, mutual, reciprocal experience, even with them being the main focus. Always, it's always about them. You can't help but learn from it. You just can't help it.
I'm curious, just for you, something that you even just said, and I agree with, is a lot of times the work that we do on ourselves is how we're able to show up for others and help and support them. So was that coming back home to your heart? What was that experience like for you when you yourself went through that?
Oh, it was a pain in the ass. It was so hard. Like, I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Like, it was incredibly physically painful, and I was very fortunate to be, and still am fortunate to have, a solid pack of amazing girlfriends who I met in midlife. I met when I moved back here, and then even years after. And it is so true in that sense that, like, if you're willing to be courageous and really listen in, you and I have spoken about this too, that person, that energy of person shows up for you, and you show up for them, right? Because now you're at a different wave. You're on a different wave. And so, and one of my friend who I was mentioning before, Kelly, who was the one who really helped me feel safe in my body, she calls it keys. She's like, you just did a different key. And so you just move on a different key. They're at an A, you're at a C, it's all good. Versus like levels. Sometimes we think of it more vertically. It was tough. And I was able to, underneath that fear, and that's where the intuitive part comes in, right? So important it's essential to really tap into it, because fear is inevitable. I'm not a fearless person. Like, I don't subscribe to like, be fearless. I feel like it's very much, I think Elizabeth Gilbert talks about that, like, have the fear, hold its hand. It's not going to drive kind of thing. It's there, but you just need to let it know who's in charge. It's going to show up. Your intuition underneath it will be your anchor and guide. So I had such faith and trust, because I couldn't word it. It's hard to explain. I always say, like, your intuitive hits are like cilantro and orgasms, because you know when you had it, but you don't know how to explain it.
That's amazing.
Right?
For some people that
true?
tastes like soap. I don't.
You know what I mean? Like, you can't explain it, but you know when you've had it. It's just how it goes. So it's like, I didn't have words for it, but I just knew, keep going. There was something in me that was like, you are safe to keep going. Because I was like, I went to, thank God that my general physician is enough of a holistic practitioner that I was like, what's happening? I need to get x-rays. I thought I was having like a heart attack. I was like, what is happening? He was like, I think you're high functioning anxiety. And I would say, keep getting massages and keep going to your therapist. And I was like, okay. And what helped me the most, as much as I love my therapist, and he and I moved on in amicable ways, because I didn't feel like I needed, we spoke about this in your interview, was that verbal. I didn't need the verbal. I could feel it. So I got massages like twice a month consistently, because I could feel in my body, something needs to move. And for me, it was massage. I needed to completely let my mind relax and just trust that whatever was moving was helping open. And chiropractor. I went to and helped open. And so getting reacquainted with your intuition, it's like It's just refamiliarizing yourself with it. You'll know it. You'll sense it. I have a friend who's in Utah who does tarot readings, and I check in with her like once every, twice a year or something like that. And she said that a lot of men have been coming to her and they're like, I don't know what I really want from this. Like, I don't know how to do this. And she's like, I don't know how to explain to them like how to tap into their intuition. And I said, well, just ask them what had them come to you. And they're probably going to go, I don't know. And there's your lead in.
Yeah, I think that's true of most of us. We show up at these points and we don't really know why we're there. And it's like, this is weird and I don't know why. And then we logic ourselves out of it, or we just feel like it's so odd. And that's why I love having conversations like this more and more to normalize that this is actually not weird. It's actually weird that we've numbed ourselves away from our intuition. So coming back home to it, and it really is a feeling of home. Like I can't get enough breath work and meditation personally, because it's like, wow, it feels so good to be back in my body. It's like sometimes I don't want to leave a meditation. It used to be I couldn't get myself to meditate. And sometimes I don't want it to end now because it just feels so good to be in that place. It's really interesting about the massage and the physical aspect. I've never heard that or thought of it, but I feel like that kind of my massage is going and getting acupuncture. I really love it. It just feels so good. Or Reiki. It just feels so good, kind of similarly.
And that's the same thing. It's trusting yourself. Fortunately, there's so many different modalities for body work that you just trust yourself with which one is the most curious to you. Which one is the most like, I'd be willing to check that out and see, right? Realize that your mind's going to try to talk you out of it. That's normal. So listen in. And one of the things I do to this day over and over and over and over as much as I need to is when I notice that I'm starting to get revved, I will put my hand in my heart and I'll just say, I'm safe. I'm safe. I'm safe. I'm safe. And I will just say, or I'll say, you're safe. That's a self-regulation technique, because when we talk to ourselves in the third person, it's been proven that it chills us out because we talk most likely kinder to other people than we do to ourselves. Right. So, which is where the creative self-compassion comes in. So it's the sense of you're safe. You're safe. It's okay. And more likely than not, you're talking to your inner child, right? Like the fear that's amping. So I do one really fun and I love seeing guys get excited about this because they are, just conditioned. We're all programmed in a certain way, and we all have our own squashing programs that society's put on us. And for guys, it's like illogical and you can only have a few face masks, right? Like serious, the funny guy or like the tough guy. And like, that's it. You can't have anything beyond that. So when guys come in, and usually it started, I have had some come on their own, but it's usually if the company's paying for it, it's kind of like they're in, like, okay, I'll do it. And then they're in and they don't shut up. They're like, so which is so amazing. Like, it's so great. But I do this one strategy that with guys it doesn't matter, called Bring Your Inner Child to Work Day. And I just say, your inner child's always with you. And if you're going to do something that's scary, it's awesome because you're growing. And at the same time, if you're not checking it, your mind will talk you out of it or will self-sabotage you. So if you're presenting to the board, if you're pitching to a client, if you just recently got promoted and are running your first like teams meeting, and maybe you were a colleague with somebody and now you're their boss, and there's so much to that too, right? So I say it's take your inner child to work day, because your inner child is going to be like, don't do it. They're all going to laugh at you. I always think of, there's a scene in that movie, Carrie, that horror movie, Carrie, where she wants to, I think it's when she wants to go to the prom and her mom's like, they're all going to laugh at you. And I always think of that. Like, it's just to make it lighter and more playful. And so I literally say physically, and on Zoom, it's very easy because we have the meridian line. Nobody knows what's happening underneath. Right. Just to hold your hand out as if you're holding your inner child's hand, just so that part of you feels safe. Or I will say, you're on a job interview and maybe it's on Zoom, and you just say, all right, I'm going to pick you up, put you on my lap, and I'm going to show you how we adult and nail a job interview. Ready? And when you come from that place, there is just something in us that steps up.
I love how you do these visualization activities. Why is that your bag of tricks? Like, why is that something that you're so passionate about with visualization and bringing that? Like, do you know what exactly it is that happens for us in that? I'm just so curious why that's something that is so powerful to you and that you see the results from people with it.
Well, I think it's a few things. I think the first really is that it's one of those classic things like lean into what lights you up with what you're bringing. And I'm a storyteller. Like I call myself a coach, or you can call yourself whatever you want, but it's really, I'm a storyteller. So I do that by allowing space for people to share their stories in a creative way, whether it's them sharing their story or if I'm writing and it's fiction writing, like I allow the character space to tell their story. And so for me, that I'm so engaged in that and I so trust myself that I want to be with you because I trust myself to know that I know how to create the container and I sense enough to know when to pull back and when to go forward. And 9 times out of 10, when you bring creativity into a space that's already incredibly vulnerable, people lighten up. There's something that they tap into because play is it's a natural need that we have. You know, there's a man named Dr. Stuart Brown who created the Museum of Play. I think they only have one in Rochester, New York, but he coined the phrase, the opposite of, how did he say it? The opposite of play isn't work, it's depression. And so it makes sense, right? And another, just to tag this in case people can hear it in a different way, I had interviewed this incredible soul coach named Jackie Leonardini, and she shared a story that it hit so home. And she was going through her coaching certification for soul coaching. And we go through as a client, you have to be in the client's shoes and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm really going to ask people to do this. Like, this is so hard. And her mentor looked at her and said, it's so hard because you're abusing yourself instead of amusing yourself. Amuse yourself instead of abuse yourself, and everything will change. Like, don't take what's coming up so seriously. Allow it room and give it love, and everything will change. And so that, even now I can feel it. Like, it's just so powerful.
Yeah. One of the things that I share with my coaching clients is that we're either in fear or we're in love. And I agree with what you said earlier about fear doesn't go away. It's a natural part of the human condition. It's there for lots of reasons. But we can shift from one into the other and play, fun, joy, all of amusement, laughter. Those are all acts of love. That is all in the love variety rather than in the fear variety. So what you're saying there really hits home for me, and just thinking about that is on the other side. Like, if you're looking at the shift from one to the other, one of the fastest ways to bring you out of fear is to invite some kind of laughter or some kind of play into it.
Yeah.
And to lean, your creativity is also love. There's no creativity in the fear side of things when we're over in that realm.
100%. Like, and I bring that in when I'm in organizations, I'll say there's 2 buckets, fear and love. And I'll say, before anybody says anything about love is all the higher feels that chances are you don't want to run away from. And sometimes maybe you do, but it's inspiration, it's joy, it's excitement, it's curiosity, it's everything that lights you up. And fear is all of the other heavier. They're heavier. And if you shift your perspective and look at those parts of you as characters, I go straight to characters because that's how I play with clients. You have so much more love for them. You just do. It's like that whole thing Brene Brown said, if you heard everybody's story, you'd fall in love with them. It's the same thing. So instead, you're seeing these parts of yourself from a place of a distance, which creates more patience, really, and creates more compassion. So it's a self-compassion technique because it allows you to see yourself from a little bit more distance. So you're able to in another way for you to tap into that divine feminine intuitive energy. because you're not in the space that's embarrassed or in the place that feels rejected. You're realizing, well, I'm noticing I'm feeling rejected. Oh, that. And if you can ahead of time create a character profile for that part, you can name it Randy Rejector or Rejected, or you sometimes, you might give it like a character like Ducky from Pretty in Pink or whatever. You might just think of someone like who is a character that you just connect to. And then if you bring in characters, I've had people make them up, and I've had people take characters from movies and from books. And if you can do that ahead of time, because when you're triggered, you're not going to have the bandwidth to do that. Your aperture is like this, right? So it eases you into, the more you notice it, you can go, oh, that was Maleficent. My Maleficent's popping up, my Maleficent. I have a funny story about that. So I just put that on Instagram. When my daughter was like 4, I had a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old at the time. This was 6 or 7 years ago. I was cooking at the stove and my daughter ran up to me with a Disney book and she was so excited. And she was like, Mom, look, it's you. And I was like, she's so cute. She's going to show me Jasmine or like Pocahontas maybe. And she opens the book to Maleficent, like standing with the horns and she's pointing. And I lost my shit. I literally was like, I am the worst mother in the world. I can't believe that she sees me as Maleficent. And I texted one of my good friends and broke the news that I was the most horrible mother in the world. And my friend, without even missing a beat, texted me back and was like, I don't know about you, but what I see in that picture is an incredibly powerful woman with a fierce sense of style. And I was hysterically laughing and crying. And when I look back on it, going back to what we were talking about before with energy, my daughter came up to me with excited energy. She didn't come up to me with this like, Mom, I'm so scared. I see you in a book and it's horrible. She was like, oh, and it was the first time I noticed her energy, recalling it again when I just posted that a couple of days ago. And when I embraced my inner Maleficent, and when I saw Maleficent, the movie, if anybody has seen it, I don't want to give any spoilers, but you have so much more compassion to seeing her story. You have so much more love. You have so much more empathy. It's like, and I'm like, yeah, I so relate to that. And when my Maleficent gets revved up, 9 times out of 10, it's when I'm so scared and feel totally out of control that I need to be in power. You know what I mean? And I'm like, I can feel my horns start to grow. So it's really helpful to do it ahead of time, to just create the characters ahead of time so that you can you can notice and go, oh, and then you actually kind of laugh at it like, oh, that's kind of funny. Okay. So, she popped up. Okay. And it gives you it just gives you more space.
Yeah, it's so fun. I love how you bring your own creative flair to the work that you do and you help people to do this. And there's so much levity in that. And like you said, there is space. I've talked about it many times on the podcast that I have named my mind Natalie. And no offense to any Natalies in the world. I actually have some very lovely Natalies in my life, but that's just the name that Natalie told me she was giving herself. And so it helps me to just be like, oh my gosh, Natalie, there you go again. But what you're saying is even more personas than just like my mind is named Natalie. You're talking about like different sides of yourself and different ways of being. Is that kind of
totally? So I'll back up. So when I was, and then I'll connect it because there is like a therapeutic modality called internal family systems that was created by Dr. Are you familiar with it?
A little bit, but it's never been talked on the podcast about. So if you have anything to share.
Actually, I'm reading this one right now. He has 2 different books, but I'm reading this one. You Are the One.
Oh, I've heard of this book. I have not read it.
Really powerful.
Good. Okay.
And it's specifically about relationships. Yeah, it's about intimate relationships, which we all can learn from. So he created that, and he has very distinct titled personas, like the exile and the protector. He has and it's very therapeutic. I just heard about this maybe a couple years ago, this style. Backing up, like over 20 years ago, when I was a senior in college, I was in a theater class. I went to Ithaca College and I was in a theater class, and you were given the opportunity to write a play. And I was like, okay. And for whatever reason, and I just don't even know to this day why I am convinced I was like a vessel that was open, and it was like, ding, we're just going to get this out of you. So it was called Me, Myself, and I. And it was all about this girl named Meg. And it opens up where she stood up for like a semi-formal, and she's on her bed and she's crying. And one by one, a little girl runs in, and then like a mom runs in, and then a teenager runs in, and then like a rebellious, sexy 20-something runs in, and then a grandmother runs in. And you end up realizing they're all Meg, and they're all with her. And then through the play, you see her hit really big rites of passages with all of them with her. And it ended with her passing away during childbirth, but it was beautiful because what happened was all of her parts surrounded the baby, and that was the end. And that always stood out to me. And there's, part of the screenplay I'm writing now, I'm on like the third version of it. That's kind of naturally wanting to come back. It keeps coming up. Like, it was so healing for me to realize you aren't just Jenless, right? I'm not just Kristy Mandour. I have many different characters in me. And there's something that people can immediately go to like multiple personality. It's not that. It's really grounding yourself and understanding that you really are. I always think of, what was the story about the mother in the shoe, with all the kids in the shoe? You know what I'm talking about? We just think of it like that. Like if you really tap into like the highest self, your highest leader, whatever you want to call it, it's all the same. And all of the characters are your kids. Like you're tending to them. You need to know which one needs you the most, right? We have a tendency to push it down and think we're going to get rid of it. We're going to get rid of it. When the more you do that, the more it's like a kid on your shoulder, tapping, tapping, tapping. And so for you to really look at certain parts of yourself that can be really scary, you need to feel safe in your body. And a lot of times it comes from having some sort of professional support so that you can stay and that whatever comes up is not going to be life-shattering that you won't be able to recover from. It's actually incredibly healing to the point of energetic, like you're loosening energetics that have been so constricted.
It does feel like this gift channeled through you at such a young age, and you have been nurturing it and bringing it into the world in different ways. And it's also coming through to you. I got chills when you said that part about the woman dies and it surrounds the baby. Like, I just got chill. I'm talking about it again and I've got chills. So there's something there, Kristy, for sure, that you're meant to be birthing into the world. For sure. So one of my mentors says that you don't have an inner child, you have a whole inner preschool. But I like your idea. If it's not even just like preschool age, there's all of these different, personas at all of these different ages. Just the story that you're saying there rings so true to what really exists inside of us.
Yeah. And with you saying that, what I'm hearing too, that I feel like is a really poignant point, is it also gives you agency over choice. You get to choose who your characters are. You get to choose. And when you choose, you can't help but love them because you're choosing it, right? For me, it's much more natural. I mean, I let whatever characters are coming through to really kind of form themselves, but they are usually already pre-made characters. Like Anna from Frozen is absolutely one of my characters. The godmother from Cinderella is absolutely one of my, like, they're there. Tinkerbell is there. It's like, there's like a childlike essence of it. And with that, you have more agency over who is sitting at your table. So I'll have clients, we'll walk through, it's like it's a framework of it, but they'll start creating their characters, and we don't do them all at once. We just do whatever ones they feel curious about. It's not usually the one that's the most intense, right? Sometimes it's the one that makes them feel like, creates this feeling of joy and excitement. They create a character for that. And then they create a table. Like they get to create a table setting. So it can be in the, on the beach, it can be in their backyard, it can be in their dream home, it can be in the woods, it can be in a tree house. It doesn't matter. They're just get to create it. And so there's this sense of creativity, like I'm creating the safe space for them all to come. And then there is an internal feeling of relief because they're all feeling seen. It's beyond words. It really is like a feeling. You can sense it. And it's not for everybody. That's why it's wonderful that coaching is a saturated market. It's wonderful because we are in such a high demand with the loneliness epidemic and with suicide rates and with mental health at the state that it's in. Thank God we have so many people who are there to support and offer healing that you really can connect to. But I will say that one of the main benefits early on of really tapping into your intuition, so that if you are someone who wants to reach out to some sort of, therapist or coach, you'll be able to choose from a place that's more internally wiser than coming from a frantic fear. I'll just choose anybody place, which is still a lesson. You can't, it's not wrong. It's just, but it really does help with you choosing wisely, because the best coaches, I heard this and I love it. It's like, I'm not your sage on the stage. I'm your guide on the side and then I just added on like coming along for the ride. Like, we're just here. I'm in your passenger seat. You're always in the driver's seat. I might hold the map. I might say this might be an interesting route to go. And you always get to say yes or no. That's how it goes. And it's just really important for people to understand that they are consistently in the driver's seat with the support alongside of them, because reaching out to someone, when you're reaching out to someone, chances are you're in a very vulnerable state. You might have gone through a transition. You may have been dealing with a major upheaval in life. It doesn't matter if you're moving or if you went through a major breakup or whatever it is. You lost your job, lost a loved one. You're in a very vulnerable state. And so the more you can tap in when life is like pretty normal and easy. And just kind of day by day, it's inevitable up and downs that are going to come. You're strengthening the same muscle. So when the upheavals do inevitably show up and those challenges happen, you'll be so familiar with being there that even if it's like shaky, you'll have a practice to know how to tap back in, to know what is the best choice for me to make, what is the most supportive choice for me to make right now. And it will come so much easier.
Yeah, I love that idea of just continuously working it, especially in the good times. But it tends to be that we look to these things when we are in the upheaval, So do you have any recommendations for people for kind of consistently staying in touch with their intuition? Is it doing character work and just being aware, or are there any tools or strategies that they can put into place for day to day?
Yeah, I always say keep it simple and have it interweave within your life instead of looking, because a lot of the clients I work with are very high achieving. They have a tendency to be very fast. And so the thought of for them to create a sustainable practice, taking time, quote unquote, out, I work with them on like shifting, like, well, it's actually carving time in. You're not taking time out. It's not adding one more thing to do. You're carving it in. You're allowing space for it in. So I always go to, if you're in a car, if you're someone who has a car, I always say use stoplights. We may have talked about this when you were on, I'm not sure, but because chances are you're in your car a couple times a day, if you have a car, right? Or even if you're using public transportation, you can have it be based on stops, like when it stops, subway or whatever, and use that as a check-in. Just have that, like start programming your body to use that as like a signal, as a check-in. I love traffic lights because it's a clear visual and timer. So red light, so it's signaling you to stop, and you check in and you just breathe. And then when it's green, you go. And that's where I would say start. If you are someone who's like, no, I'm really in for it, I really want to do it even more, then I would say create bookends. So when you wake up in the morning, checking in, how are you feeling? What's going on in your mind? Is this a helpful thought or is it unhelpful? Like just going there. And then at night, do another check-in and maybe write it out, because then you chances are will have a better night's sleep because you're getting it out before you go to bed. So that's that piece. when it comes to starting self-compassion, one of my favorite books on it is by Dr. Shauna Shapiro called Good Morning, I Love You. I want to hug this book because it's so beautifully written. It's like you're having a conversation with a good friend, and she shares her stories and she shares practices. And one of her practices that is so sweet, like it's such a sweet and loving and very powerful practice, is before she wakes up in the morning, she'll put her hand on her heart and she'll say, "Good morning, I love you." And then she'll get up. And it's just this very sweet check-in. It's just reminding yourself that it's here first, right? So right away, you're waking up being on your own side, as Rick Hansen says. He says, like, how can we be on our own side? Aim to be on your own side. And then the other book, if you have readers, like a lot of readers here, that I feel the exact same way about, is The Perfectionist's Guide to Losing Control, which I may have told you about on the beach when we were together. That book rocked my world. It's by Catherine Morgan Schaffler, and she's an incredible writer. And I think I went through literally every single emotion on the color wheel of emotions in that book, like all of them. Like one minute you're like, oh my gosh, and there's so much. And then the next minute she writes something very witty and you're laughing. Like it's this, and she sees you, and she breaks down perfectionists with 5 types. And you can take a quiz and see, and those are the 2 books. Like if people are like, how do I even start these practices? Kristen Neff is another one. She does self-compassion. She's like really like the pioneer of self-compassion, which she is wonderful. She has 2 books out too. I resonated with Dr. Shauna Shapiro a bit more.
Yeah. Thank you for all of these resources and that tool. And I know we've got definitely some heavy readers who will appreciate all of your book recommendations. So I'll link all of those in the show notes. And I love what you say about the during the day one too, because some people, like for some reason, we are just not good at the getting up and going to bed thing. And then we guilt ourselves over not having this morning and night practice that so many people are so good at having. So if you're not that person who remembers to do it at night and morning, for whatever reason, you just can't build that practice, doing the stoplight thing is so good because you can do that just during your day. You don't have to remember to do it. Like it's just going to happen as you stop at a stoplight. You're going to be like, oh, stop. And so that's a really supportive one. One that started me in mindfulness was touching my steering wheel. I would feel the coolness or the heat, depending on the time of year. That was my very first mindful practice. I had heard it in a 5-minute meditation I did. She said, feel your steering wheel. So when I would sit in my car, I would always just sit and feel my steering wheel. So what you said about the stoplight really reminded me of that, because that's something you're doing anyway throughout your day. So
yeah, and pairing that, right? So when you're at the stoplight, feel your steering wheel. I mean, it can keep it simple. You are going to practice the habits if they're simple, and if they're short, like keep it small. Keep it small. It doesn't have to be this 20-minute, twice a day meditation thing that you jump into, because it may not be sustainable. Just keep it super simple, and you will begin to notice, oh my gosh, I just noticed my thought. That was cool. It really does work that way. Yeah. Keep it simple. Be kind to your mind.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. Is there anything else that you haven't shared today that you just really feel is on your heart and mind that you'd like to impart on any listener of this podcast?
The only thing I would add is to really remember that you were born trusting yourself. And so if anything that you heard resonates with you, it's kind of like take what resonated, leave the rest, or shelve. I sometimes say shelve the rest, because maybe it comes another time, and just practice one thing you heard. If it's looking into one of the books, great. If it's the steering wheel combo with the traffic light, great. If it's starting to pay attention to your thoughts, great. But just start small, be kind to yourself, and realize that it really is, when you are choosing one simple and small practice to do, you are truly changing so much that is beneficial to not just you, but your entire generational lineage, forward and backwards, and the world. Like you are, when you're kinder to yourself, you are simultaneously strengthening your capacity to be kinder to other people. That's how it works. When you are practicing strengthening your self-compassion, you are simultaneously strengthening your compassion for other people.
Boom, mic drop. I'm obsessed with self-compassion. So that's so good. Thank you for summarizing it in just such a beautiful way. You have such a gift for that. I have one last question that I ask every single guest. Kristy, where do you see the magic in the world?
I'm going to say in our imagination. I mean, it's what came to me. That's where the magic is. It's in our imagination. And if you choose, one of the best things I've ever heard was worry is the misuse of your imagination. Wow. And what if are two of the most powerful words. It can be what if, worry, 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 or it can be what if, like, what if I do this awesome podcast with Jen Liss? What if I do choose to go on that retreat? Who am I going to meet? What if I do end up launching into that business, or I do go for that promotion, or I do decide to go to that restaurant? Who am I going to meet? What if? Right? And you can choose it how you want. And that all comes from your imagination.
So beautiful. I love that answer. Also, the difference in when you were like, what if worry, when we talked about the heavy and the light, then when you went into like the what ifs of the possibility, your entire energy, everything is so different. You can see that night and day difference just in your energetic of describing it. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This was such an amazing conversation. Be sure to go check out the beginning of our conversation on Kristy's podcast. So sometimes it's good to, go in reverse order. I sometimes like watch the end of something before I watch the beginning. So whatever order you did it is the perfect order. Thanks, Kristy.
Thank you, Jen.
Okay, Kristy, where can people find you?
They can find me on Instagram at Kristy Mandour. I have a link tree on there that has all the info for my website, which is sowtospeak.com, SOWTOSPEAK.com. And then I'm also going to be launching a group program online course called Get Ahead of Your Head. It's for high achieving leaders, entrepreneurs, creatives, and it's going to be focused all on emotional intelligence, mindset, and energy, and how you can really tap into having your mind work for you and inevitably bringing in different creative character strategies as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everyone. Go and check out Kristy, go follow her, go check out her program. And thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks so much, Jen Liss.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Kristy. A couple of the things that really stood out to me are some of those things that she said right there at the end. Be kind to your mind. The thoughts that we have are really influencing not just our own behavior, but the way that others are showing up in the world in return to us. Every thought that you have impacts the way that you show up. And so speaking kinder to yourself is going to shift not just your thought right now in the moment. It could shift everything for an entire generation. So being kinder to yourself, speaking to yourself with intention, really having self-compassion is so dang powerful. Another thing that she said is really just that idea of saying, you're safe, instead of saying, I'm safe, because we do tend to be kinder to other people than we are to ourselves. So knowing this, just simply saying to yourself, you're safe, you're safe. In these moments when we get nervous, when we get fearful, when we start to doubt ourselves, reminding ourselves that we are indeed safe is one of the most powerful tools that we can pull out of our toolbox. So even if it's stopping at that stoplight and reminding yourself that you are safe and saying you're safe can be such a powerful practice. So I encourage you to give that one a shot. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, I encourage you to take a little screenshot right there on your phone of the episode, share it on social media. You can tag me at Untethered Jen. You can tag Kristy. Her Instagram is right there in the show notes. Tag us both. We will re-share your post. Thank you again. It really means the world to me that you would listen. You just keep shining your magical unicorn light out there for all to see. I'll see you next time.